Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestle News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well, having a good Saturday. As always, there is a ton of news stories to get into today, especially following last night's edition of SmackDown on Fox. So let's get straight into today's stories, and let's start off talking about Jay White. Yes, New Japan Pro Wrestling's Jay White, because WWE reportedly is making, quote, a strong play at Jay White. Now, following his defeat to Kota Ibushi at the main event of Day 2 of Wrestle Kingdom 15 for the IWGP Heavyweight and Intercontinental Championships, Jay White said in the post-match press conference that he was simply done with pro wrestling and just wanted to go home of the sacrifices that he has made. Now, many, myself included, believe this to be just an angle. However, the Super J-Cast is reporting that their sources have told them that there is some doubt whether White will extend his New Japan contract and that WWE are, quote, making a strong play for him. They also reported that it is currently 50-50 as to whether he stays or leaves New Japan in the future. They said, quote, several sources have indicated there is some doubt whether Jay White will extend his New Japan contract, rumored to be up at the end of the month. WWE are believed to be making a strong play for him, and it's 50-50 whether he stays or goes. Now, White does have some connections at the moment currently in WWE, as Finn Balor and Shinsuke Nakamura were part of a group that recruited him to New Japan Pro Wrestling in the first place. White has stated in the past, though, that signing with WWE was not on his radar. Now, there's more to this story, because, as I mentioned, with the interest that's now going on in Jay White, he does reportedly have some WWE superstars within the company that are going to bat for him right now. As I mentioned, it's been reported via the Super J podcast that there is some doubt whether or not the Bullet Club leader will re-sign his contract with New Japan when his current deal expires at the end of the month. It was also said that WWE is making a strong play for him. Well, in an update, WrestleVotes on social media, on Twitter, very reputable account for breaking several news stories. They have a very strong reputation and a very strong track record of being accurate. They have reported that there are a lot of rumours going around on White in WWE right now, but one thing that's for certain is his support in the WWE locker room. It was noted that there are a few WWE talents who have, quote, went out of their way to speak highly of Jay White. The report also noted that the support from WWE talents resonates with some people more than others, an apparent reference to company officials. It was indicated that the support from talent may hold more weight with Triple H, but that was not confirmed. So we spoke about this briefly the other day here when we spoke about Jay White, what this meant. To me, I still think this might be the case that I felt that the press conference that they did after his defeat at Wrestle Kingdom, I felt that was an angle. I felt that was New Japan and Jay White trying to stir things up and trying to get people talking, especially coming out of Wrestle Kingdom. The reason I think they're doing it and they're playing into it, and maybe this is where the truth of the matter lies, is I recall 12 months ago, a report came out that said that specifically Triple H, but those in WWE were looking at Jay White, and that Triple H was a big fan of Jay White and was very keen on signing Jay White once his contract expired with New Japan. Now, that was 12 months ago, and that report 12 months ago said we'll have to wait and see because his contract expires next year, in next January after Wrestle Kingdom. Well, that's where we are now, and it would appear with this story, with lots of people talking about Jay White, lots of people talking about WWE, that's probably the reason, because WWE, frankly, have been interested in Jay White for a very long time. That's why all of this discussion is happening now, because there's been interest for a long time. And with Jay White's playing into the media and playing into WWE's hands by saying in this press conference, I'm leaving, that's where this discussion has come from. Now, if I had to put my neck out on the line and say, do I think Jay White will stay with New Japan or do I think he'll go to WWE? Personally, I think he'll stay. I think he'll stay at least for a couple more years. There have been some wild discussions about that Jay White's actually signed a new contract and he's got loads of time left on a contract. I don't believe that. I believe the reports when it comes to his contract being up soon are accurate, but ultimately I think he'll re-sign with New Japan. I think he'll re-sign with New Japan because you have to figure out Jay White is very different from other people when they've left New Japan in the past. I think some people, especially when they're American-based or they're American natives, once their contract's up with New Japan and WWE's interested, it serves multiple purposes. Not only does it serve to be making a lot of money, but it also serves to be being back at home more often, not having to travel to Japan. Jay White's different. He's from New Zealand. I don't know if he's an actual native of America at this point or if he lives in Japan. I would suspect he probably at this point does live in Japan. And frankly, as he's mentioned before, WWE isn't really on his radar. And you have to remember this when it comes to WWE. And I don't want to put down that WWE isn't an attractive proposition, because of course it is. And WWE could more than make it worth his while, especially on the finance side of things. If they wanted to make him a strong offer, a very high offer, the guy at the end of the day is 28 years old, one of the biggest and best stars in the business right now, one of the best heels and villains in New Japan and pro wrestling right now. He's very, very good at what he does. WWE, despite the pandemic, could make him a very convincing offer when it comes to contracts. That could be something that persuades him. But I think when it comes to WWE, especially over the last couple of years with the way they've treated their talent and the scandals they've had, especially stuff with the third-party platforms, not that Jay White really gets involved in that, but I do think WWE's reputation has been slightly tarnished in terms of how they treat talent over the last couple of years. You have to remember, when those New Japan stars came over to WWE in 2016, AJ Styles, Nakamura, Gallows, Anderson, WWE at the time was a very attractive proposition because it felt like things had changed in the culture of WWE because of the success of NXT. It felt like you had more of a reasonable opportunity. There wasn't judgment before you came into the company. There wasn't all of this judgment of, oh, they're from New Japan, or they're from the Indies, or they used to work for Ring of Honor, they used to do this, they used to do that. That judgment wasn't there anymore, that maybe had been in the past. So WWE felt like a more attractive and maybe more progressive company at the time. I think WWE has regressed over the course of the last 4 or 5 years when it comes to that. Now it feels like even more there is this judgment if you come in from an outside company. Now it feels even more there is this judgment if you come up from NXT and you're over and the fans like you, but you haven't got over in WWE, you've got over somewhere else. And people will say, well, what about AJ Styles? Well, AJ Styles is like anything. There are people that go outside of that rule, and that's AJ Styles in this situation. But you look at Gallows, you look at Anderson, you look at Nakamura. I know Nakamura did well last night on SmackDown. Conspiracy theorists might say, oh, that's because to persuade Jay White. I don't think so. But my point being that we've seen time and time again that it doesn't matter where you came from. It doesn't matter what you've done outside WWE. What truly matters is what Vince McMahon thinks about you. And that's what we haven't heard at this point. We haven't heard the opinion of the most important opinion in WWE, and that's Vince McMahon. So I think if Jay White was even considering the offer right now from WWE, he would look at it and probably weigh up money, obviously. We're still in a pandemic, and money is money, business is business. But I think also he would look at, what spot do I have right now in New Japan? And it's a very good spot. What spot will I have in WWE? Is it worth my while financially, but is it worth my while creatively? And in terms of the success of my career to go to WWE right now? And I'm not sure that is the case. If I was Jay White, which of course I'm not, I'm sitting here talking to you, I'm not performing at Wrestle Kingdom, I would maybe be slightly hesitant. Which leads me to think that ultimately he will re-sign with New Japan, and I think he'll stay with New Japan. But these reports don't come out of nowhere, and these reports, quite frankly, aren't anything that new. They've been reports that came out 12 months ago, and the general consensus at the time of those reports 12 months ago was, give it 12 months because the story will become bigger in 12 months because that's when Jay White's contract will expire. So it isn't the end of this. I'm sure this will be something that rumbles on until eventually Jay White makes a decision. I think personally he'll end up staying with New Japan. Going to WWE, of course, as a fan, of WWE, which I am, I think everyone still is, regardless of critiques that you can make of their product and critiques when it comes to the culture there and the storylines there at times. We're still a fan of WWE because we're a fan of pro wrestling. Would it be amazing to see Jay White have great success in WWE? Of course it would. Is that guaranteed? Nothing's guaranteed, especially when it comes into WWE. And quite frankly, not even success is not guaranteed, but sometimes it's the opportunity to succeed isn't guaranteed in WWE, and that sometimes is the issue as well. So I think we haven't heard the last when it comes to Jay White and this whole drama about won't he re-sign, will he sign with WWE, where's he going to go? This will rumble on. I think he'll sign with New Japan. Would it be nice to see him with WWE? Of course. But I think he'll be hesitant. I do think he'll be hesitant, but time will tell when it comes to that one. Let's talk about SmackDown last night. Let's talk about what everyone's talking about, and that's the main event angle, and that being Roman Reigns getting a #1 contender for the Royal Rumble for the Universal Championship, but it's not who we thought it would be, because it looks like WWE official and former NWA World Heavyweight Champion Adam Pearce is the new #1 contender for the WWE Universal Championship at the Royal Rumble, facing Roman Roman Reigns. Now, previously, it was announced before the show that last night's episode of SmackDown on Fox would feature a gauntlet match to determine Reigns' opponents for the Royal Rumble pay-per-view. The participants announced for the gauntlet were Shinsuke Nakamura, Daniel Bryan, Sami Zayn, King Corbin, and Rey Mysterio. No Kevin Owens, he was still selling the attack of last week. However, WWE ended up doing an angle where Roman Reigns and Paul Heyman, quote, pulled some strings to get Pearce put into the gauntlet. This came after an opening segment where Reigns blamed Pearce for what happened to Kevin Owens last week at the end of SmackDown and made it clear he was not happy over Pearce booking tonight's gauntlet. Now, the gauntlet match came down in the end to Shinsuke Nakamura and Adam Pearce, who was followed to the ring by Reigns, Heyman, and Jey Uso. Reigns and Uso entered the ring first and destroyed Shinsuke Nakamura, who at that point had been competing for over an hour, with several moves including a super kick, a Superman punch, and the Uso splash. Reigns then talked some trash to Adam Pearce to let him know that SmackDown belongs to the Tribal Chief and he can do whatever he wants whenever he wants. Reigns then aggressively rolled Pearce into the ring. Pearce said a few words to Reigns but turned around to a huge super kick from Uso. Reigns then signaled for the timekeeper to ring the bell and Uso pulled Pearce on top of Nakamura. Both Pearce and Nakamura were laid out, but the referee was ordered to make the count and Adam Pearce got the victory and therefore became the #1 contender for the Universal Championship. Once the match was said and done, Reigns stood tall with the Universal Championship in the air as Pearce began to recover. As SmackDown went off the air, Reigns stared down at Pearce as Michael Cole and Corey Graves did question as if Adam Pearce is actually really the #1 contender to Reigns at the Royal Rumble. Since then, WWE has actually released a few graphics to indicate that is legitimately the case. Adam Pearce at the moment, as of right now, is scheduled to face Roman Reigns for the Universal Championship at the Royal Rumble. There is so much to get into when it comes to that, and I know some people might want to see me criticise WWE here, and to be honest, I don't want to seem like I'm sitting on the fence. Maybe I am, though. I suppose that I'm not going to criticise it, I'm not also going to praise it. I've seen people being very much on the two sides of this one, some people heavily criticising it, and I think the criticisms here are incredibly justified, in the sense that you've got a roster filled with superstars, more than capable superstars. This is a time as well, not so much for SmackDown, but the case for Raw, where ratings are down and there have been lots of criticisms of the WWE product that the ratings are down because WWE has this inability to create new stars that can take them back up to where they should be, especially in the ratings and in terms of the product. SmackDown, not so much. SmackDown's been doing okay in the ratings, especially when it comes to Christmas Day, but in terms of the creative product and in terms of the product that we're given on Friday nights, it's actually been very good. So, but the point being that you've got arguably the second biggest pay-per-view of the year in the Royal Rumble, because in my opinion, the Royal Rumble's overtaken SummerSlam now in that sense. You've got the second biggest pay-per-view of the year, and look at your two world title matches. You've got Drew McIntyre versus Goldberg, a returning legend. That match will last 3 minutes regardless of the outcome. And you've also at the moment got Roman Reigns versus Adam Pearce. Now, Adam Pearce isn't a legend, but he's someone who hasn't competed in the ring for 6 years, and he's not this young, up-and-coming WWE superstar that probably is more deserving of that spot in terms of elevating to the next level. So I understand the criticisms of that. I also understand people saying that they like it because it's different, it tells a story, the story makes sense, and people are curious to see what happens with Adam Pearce. Will he have a match? Because they're acting like Adam Pearce is this big schlub, but if they actually tell his story, they can tell a story of him being a pro wrestler, him being a former NWA World Heavyweight Champion on multiple occasions, him being a guy that ultimately just didn't get an opportunity to go to the big leagues in WWE, so he became a producer, he became a trainer, he became official, worked his way up the company that way. There is story to be told there. Is it the right time to tell this story? I don't think so. This would be a story that could happen after WrestleMania, at a Backlash, at an Extreme Rules, at a Payback, that kind of B pay-per-view, at TLC in December. That would have been a fine story to tell. Not for the Royal Rumble, not for the second biggest pay-per-view of the year. I don't think this is the right time to be putting Adam Pearce in a Universal Championship match. That's my criticism of it. I liked the match. I really liked that Nakamura got to the final of the match and he had an hour to compete because Shinsuke Nakamura has been criminally underused. Not even underused or misused. The fact he's in a tag team and he's getting pinned most weeks on SmackDown is laughable. This is the guy that had the world at his feet when he came over from New Japan, like I mentioned about Jay White, in 2016. Had a great run in NXT, was over when he came over to the main roster as well, won the Royal Rumble, and then since about 2018 has just been so poorly handled. It's nice to at least see them try to get some stock back in the Shinsuke Nakamura name. I like that side of things. There were good things and there were bad things to take out of last night's show and last night's main event. Nakamura was great. The story isn't a bad story with Adam Pearce and Roman Reigns. The issue there is that it's just not the right time. It's not the right time. How can you create new stars? How can you create and elevate younger talent to the next level when you don't give them the opportunity to succeed? I mentioned this time and time again, and I've seen some people, respond to it and fight back to it on social media when they say, well, none of these superstars are ready for the main event scene, or none of these superstars are ready to challenge for the WWE or Universal Championship. You have to tell me that Adam Pearce is. And two, how can you ever make sure if they're ready or not when you don't give them the opportunity to be ready? You don't give them the opportunity to be on the big stage and grow and have a pay-per-view main event on the big stage. You'll never create new stars if you never give out opportunities. And that's the issue. That's the issue of this one. Now, as far as Adam Pearce facing Roman Reigns at the Royal Rumble, it still might not happen. It still might not happen. This could be all a swerve. This could just be an angle to get people talking. It's certainly got people talking, so it served its purpose in that sense of the imagination. But you have to remember, Shinsuke Nakamura was at the end of that. He can make a strong case as to he should be in the match. Kevin Owens didn't appear on the show at all, and I don't think that Kevin Owens-Roman Reigns angle is over yet. So there's still a high chance we could see Roman Reigns versus Kevin Owens, or we could see Roman Reigns at least maybe versus Shinsuke Nakamura at the Royal Rumble. So to say that this Adam Pearce versus Roman Reigns match is confirmed, I don't know if that really is the case at this point. Even if they go ahead with it, I don't think it'll be a terrible match because Adam Pearce can wrestle. It's just not the right time. And again, I don't have a problem with the story. I have a problem with the timing of the story. And I think that's the biggest issue there. I think that's what people have an issue with when it comes down to this. Speaking of SmackDown, we also had a title change last night on SmackDown, in that we have new SmackDown Tag Team Champions because ROODE and Dolph Ziggler are the new SmackDown Tag Team Champions. Last night on SmackDown on Fox, we saw ROODE and Ziggler capture the titles from the Street Profits. This is the first Blue Brand title reign for ROODE and Ziggler, together and separately. The Street Profits took over the titles back on the WWE Draft edition of Raw on October 12 when they switched with the former Raw Tag Team Champions, The New Day. They had been champions since winning the Raw Tag Team titles from Murphy and Seth Rollins on the March 2nd Raw show. To be honest, I enjoyed the match, and I don't mean to poo-poo over all of this. I don't mean to say that I don't care, but in reality, I don't. I don't care. And the reason I don't care is because WWE has not given us any reason to care about the tag team titles, about the tag team division, tag team wrestling in general in WWE. It doesn't mean anything. Now, that's not to say that the matches aren't good, and the match last night was good. And the ROODE and Ziggler tag team at this point, they're almost, veterans that are trying to punk out the new kids in the Street Profits. I felt it was the right time to switch the tag team titles because the Street Profits had been tag team champions since March. I think realistically, the Street Profits had been tag team champions since March on Raw and SmackDown because the tag team division in WWE is so dead. There was no reason to switch the titles because there were no better tag teams in WWE than the Street Profits because there weren't any tag teams in the WWE. So it didn't surprise me that the SmackDown tag team title switched last night, and the match was fine, but it doesn't mean anything. I mentioned this time and time again on here, on social media. What does it mean? Where is the stakes in all of this? And you can say, well, the stakes are the tag team titles, and that's fair, but tag team wrestling doesn't mean anything in WWE. That's the biggest problem here. Does it feel like a big deal? No, it doesn't. Does tag team wrestling feel like a big deal? No, it doesn't. This isn't a thing that's exclusive to SmackDown. It's the same with Raw, and it's the same with NXT. NXT can have the Dusty Tag Team Classic, and I'm glad they're having it for males and females because it makes tag team wrestling, or is an attempt to invest in tag team wrestling once again and try and build up that tag team division because, frankly, not only does NXT need tag teams, but by creating tag teams in NXT, eventually they'll start seeding tag teams for Raw and SmackDown, but then eventually the same thing will happen to them that happens to every tag team in WWE. They'll get broken up and put into singles. Why? Because Vince McMahon doesn't like to invest in tag teams. He likes to invest in single stars because that's where he thinks the money is. And he's not wrong, but the idea you can't develop and build a strong tag team division in a company is laughable when you've got your competition like AEW having the best tag team division in the world that's stacked with tag teams. So I would think that WWE absolutely needs to improve their tag team division. Whether or not they do anytime soon, I highly doubt that. Let's talk about, since we mentioned NXT there, let's move on to a story that's quite interesting because Daniel Bryan, of course, is involved with the creative team at this point in his career, and Daniel Bryan has reportedly been pushing for more WWE NXT call-ups to the SmackDown roster. Now, it's been noted several times now across a variety of platforms how Daniel Bryan had a creative role on the Blue brand for several months now. But the Wrestling Observer newsletter is reporting that he has been pushing to bring in more NXT superstars to SmackDown as a way to freshen things up. Now, there's no word on who Daniel Bryan pushed for to be called up, but it was reported, and we spoke about it here on the channel, that Adam Pearce was scheduled to debut last Friday in a main event storyline, but the call-up was nixed at the last minute. Pearce is still scheduled to be called up, but plans have him now going to Raw around the end of the month as opposed to SmackDown. This is according to the Observer. We also know that Rhea Ripley is scheduled to debut on the main roster soon. We spoke about that yesterday, so be sure to check that out. As far as Daniel Bryan wanting more NXT names on the main roster, I don't think he's alone. I think he's quite in tune with the fan base in that sense that lots of people want to see more of the NXT names on the main roster. I think a big issue when it comes to WWE right now is just the lack of... There doesn't seem to be a process there, does there? And I know people will say, well, process for process sakes, but I think there does need to be a much better and streamlined process in how superstars go from NXT to Raw and SmackDown. And vice versa, frankly, how stars go from Raw and SmackDown to NXT. Because you can call NXT the main roster, you can say that NXT isn't developmental, it still is. Why is it still developmental? Because you have stars on NXT that eventually go to Raw or SmackDown, and NXT wasn't involved in the draft or Survivor Series this year, that's for other reasons, but until you don't have stars going from NXT to Raw or SmackDown, NXT will always be developmental. Therefore, there will always be this demand from Raw and SmackDown to have the NXT stars on their show, especially when they need them the most. But there doesn't seem to be a process in how that works. Previously, Triple H spoke about that now it was going to be more strict in the sense that you couldn't just call people up at the last minute. There had to be a process and that everything had to be finished and tied up in NXT, so there was no missing storylines or missing matches or anything like that. It doesn't seem to be the case, does it? It just doesn't seem to be the case if that's legitimately the process right now, because Damian Priest is getting caught up at the last minute when he's scheduled for matches on New Year's Eve. There seems to be this confusion with what's going on. I would also question with Daniel Bryan saying he wants more NXT names to come up on the show. That is a temporary solution, I think. Having those names on Raw or SmackDown is great, but more important is what you do with them once they're on the show. And those problems go down to the creative process in WWE. Those problems come to Vince McMahon and Bruce Pritchard. You can have Damian Priest come up onto the show. You can have Rhea Ripley come on the show. You can have the Undisputed Era, Adam Cole, Karrion Kross. All of those names you can have come onto the show. But if there are bad ideas for them once they're brought to Raw or SmackDown, if there's bad creative for them once they're brought up to the main roster, if you insist on changing every aspect about them, whether it's their look, their entrance, their ring style, their ring music, their gear, all of that stuff, the way they talk, the way they walk, then it doesn't matter who you bring up. So I would argue, as a way to freshen things up, you would have to overhaul the creative process in WWE and actually start writing some good stuff and having some good ideas. It doesn't necessarily matter as much about the talent when the creative given to the talent is bad for them. And we've seen that time and time again, whether it's Riddle, Keith Lee, Nakamura, The Revival, EC3, you name it. All of these people get called up and they get given bad creative eventually, and that's what eventually brings them down. So I would say that obviously everyone wants more NXT names on the main roster, but what's more important? The creative behind it. Daniel Bryan's on the creative team, so maybe he feels like he can help with that situation. Only time will tell. Now we have some more names announced for the Royal Rumble matches, or both men's and females Royal Rumble matches later this month, because last night Bianca Belair and Bayley revealed they are now official for the 30-woman Royal Rumble match at the Royal Rumble pay-per-view. Last night's episode of SmackDown on Fox featured a backstage segment where Belair was confirmed for the Women's Royal Rumble match. Before she could speak on the match, Bayley interrupted and also declared her spot in the match. The two superstars taunted each other until Belair walked off, continuing their feud we have seen on recent weeks on SmackDown television. On the men's side of things, Otis also declared his spot for the upcoming men's Royal Rumble match. It's interesting when it comes to Bayley and Bianca Belair because they're of course two of the favourites for this year's Royal Royal Rumble match. The most favourite being Bianca Belair. As far as when I last checked, and that's when I'm going to stop checking because I don't want to check on the odds too close at the time because they can tell a story on some occasions, that Bianca Belair was the odds-on favourite. So interesting to see that Belair had officially now confirmed herself for the Royal Rumble. One of the other favourites, of course, is Rhea Ripley, which we mentioned there a second ago. So it'd be interesting to see if we came down to a final two of Belair and Ripley, considering that this time last year they were competing for the NXT Women's Championship around NXT TakeOver time. I think that was in February last year. So what a journey that would be. Nearly 12 months later, you could see them in the final two for the Royal Rumble match. How interesting would that be? The XFL will never die when it comes to pro wrestling, will it? Now, of course, the XFL is actually now owned by The Rock and his production company, but we have some interesting news when it comes to the former owner of the XFL, Vince McMahon, in the fact that he is countersuing former XFL Commissioner Oliver Luck. Now, the second iteration of the XFL was over just as quickly as it started, with the league shutting down operations at the start of the pandemic. Former XFL Commissioner Oliver Luck was fired in April, and just 2 days before the league filed bankruptcy. Luck then sued Vince McMahon 2 weeks later for wrongful termination, and McMahon has now fired back by countersuing Luck this week. The countersuit, which was filed in Connecticut, was obtained by USA Today Sports, claimed that Luck defied McMahon's orders when it came to hiring personnel for the league. When the XFL was restarted, McMahon said that the player pool would include, quote, quality football players with good character. However, Luck allowed former NFL receiver Antonio Callaway to be part of that player pool despite his past character issues. Now, there is a variety of character issues when it comes to Callaway, when it comes to driving on a suspended license, being suspended for assault charges, being suspended for 10 games by the NFL due to violating substance abuse policy. While Callaway did sign with the XFL's Tampa Bay Vipers, he got hurt before he was able to play a game. However, the league still had to pay him workers' compensation as well as pay his signing bonus, both of which McMahon is suing Luck for. McMahon is asking for compensation of $572,792, which covers Callaway's contract, the workers' compensation owed to him, and Luck's personal compensation. This is what he said, quote, Luck knowingly and deliberately deceived me repeatedly throughout the Callaway situation, which made me question whether I could continue to trust Luck to be the commissioner and CEO of the XFL. Other examples listed in the countersuit of Luck defying McMahon's orders regarding players with character issues includes Martavis Bryant and Johnny Manziel. Bryant was suspended 3 times by the NFL, while Manziel was arrested in college and then later indicted for assault charges. While neither player ever joined the XFL, Luck reportedly floated their names to get more media attention for the league, and bringing up the name of Manziel prompted this text exchange between Vince McMahon and Luck. Now, I don't know how legitimate this is, considering that I guess Vince McMahon, this is in Vince McMahon's suit, this is legitimate. The fact that Vince McMahon types this makes me think that the Mr. McMahon character was Vince McMahon. He can claim that it's not, but this is apparently Vince McMahon's text to the commissioner of the XFL. Vince McMahon quoted this, quote, how long are, the letter R, you going to play this game, Oliver? You know there is, this is in caps, no chance in hell for Manziel to play for us. I will not change my mind. So what's your plan? You are plan. Question mark, question mark. The fact that Vince McMahon is texting no chance in hell is madness. The guy is in his 70s and he's repeating his catchphrase from his WWE entrance theme. That is madness. That is absolute insanity, and the fact that that's how Vince McMahon genuinely talks, he uses the no chance in hell catchphrase in his text messages, is insane. Is absolutely insane. It's amazing the things that will come out when it comes to lawsuits, isn't it? Now, as I mentioned, the XFL was purchased by a group led by The Rock for $15 million in August. Then in October, the league announced that the league would return to play for the 2022 season. So we'll have to wait and see what happens when it comes to Vince McMahon's countersuit against the XFL commissioner. What I will say about the XFL, because we haven't really spoken about it that much here on the channel, especially in recent months, I enjoyed it, and I'm a fan of American football. I'm not a die-hard fan. Obviously, I'm here in the UK. It's not as high up on the totem pole of sports as other sports, but I watched NFL, I watched the XFL, and I enjoyed the XFL. It's a shame, like with many things, the pandemic put a stop to it. That's ultimately a shame. The biggest thing, and the reason I covered this story today, because obviously it involves Vince McMahon, but the biggest reason I covered it was just for that text message. That is, I can't overstate how it shocks me. That's what Vince McMahon does in his text. He texts no chance in how he texts his catchphrase. That's like Steve Austin texting what, or The Rock saying, do you smell what The Rock is cooking? It's insane. It's absolutely insane. But very humorous nevertheless. We have an announcement for Raw on Monday as well, because WWE has announced that Monday's Raw episode will be, quote, a huge night for WWE Champion Drew McIntyre. Now, it was teased in a new promo for Raw that McIntyre may respond to the Royal Rumble WWE Championship match challenge issued this past Monday by WWE Hall of Famer Goldberg. Now, there's no word as of yet if Goldberg will be live on Raw, as his appearance was not confirmed. I would assume, given that we're getting closer and closer, there's what, 3 weeks till the Royal Rumble, he probably will be, even if it's in the form of a satellite appearance. But also, Monday's Raw will also see McIntyre face Randy Orton in a non-title match. So the Randy Orton-Drew McIntyre feud continues. I'm sure we might have some shenanigans when it comes to The Fiend or something like that. Of course, Randy Orton's going to be in the Royal Rumble. Raw, people are still talking about the McIntyre-Goldberg situation, which I guess WWE wants. People probably, I would assume, will tune in Monday because they want to see maybe the next development and what's going to happen. I think everyone, when it comes to McIntyre and Goldberg, is kind of watching with bated breath, in the sense that everyone just keeps saying to themselves at this point, I know I have, surely not. Surely not. Surely WWE wouldn't have Goldberg beat Drew McIntyre for the WWE Championship, right? Right? Surely not. Surely they wouldn't do that. And then it starts to feel like Groundhog Day, because you get the deja vu feeling, because then you realise we thought the same when it came to Super Showdown last year. Surely not. Surely WWE wouldn't have Goldberg beat The Fiend for the Universal Championship. And at the time, arguably, it was even less likely that Goldberg would beat The Fiend. Because Drew McIntyre, he might be this big, dominant WWE champion and have barely lost over the course of the last 12 months. He's got a win record of like 90%, but he has lost. He has lost matches over the course of the last 12 months, whether that's against Roman Reigns or Randy Orton or the occasional tag match on Raw or something of that nature. Drew McIntyre has done some jobs. The Fiend, in 2019, he hadn't lost to anyone. He was undefeated. He had dominated people. So if people were like, there is no chance Goldberg will beat The Fiend for the Universal Championship, 3 minutes is all it took. 3 minutes to end all of that. So, rightfully so, the question is, surely not. Surely Goldberg wouldn't beat Drew McIntyre for the WWE Championship. Surely not. You can't rule it out. You cannot rule it out, which is incredibly alarming. Incredibly alarming. We have some nice news as well when it comes to Matt and Rebby Hardy, because Matt and Rebby Hardy are expecting their 4th child. As seen on Twitter yesterday, the Hardys revealed yesterday evening that they are expecting their 4th child together, but this will be their first daughter. Matt tweeted, quote, #Team Boy is so stacked in House Hardy, we decided to add a new member to #Team Girl. Now, Matt and Rebby Hardy welcomed their first son, Maxwell, in June 2015. Then their second son in June 2017, Wolfgang Zander. And their third son, Bartholomew Kit, was born in December 2019. So congratulations to Matt and Rebby Hardy. Awesome news there, welcoming their first daughter. We got some quite interesting information when it comes to Stone Cold Steve Austin, because he has confirmed that he has no desire to ever wrestle again and his in-ring career is over. Hardly breaking news, but it's always interesting to touch base, isn't it, with Steve Austin, because there's always that discussion of will he, won't he, would he ever consider returning to the ring again? It kind of feels like every couple of years that comes up, but every so often he's very quick to quash those rumours. But WWE Hall of Famer Steve Austin recently spoke to Ryan Satin of Fox Sports and confirmed that his in-ring career is over and he has no desire to wrestle again. Now, Steve Austin, of course, hasn't wrestled since retiring 17, or at least now 18 years ago in 2003. And now Austin says he doesn't want to do anything else in the ring. He made the comments when asked if he enjoys having his Broken Skull Session show on the WWE Network as a way to keep him connected to the current roster. He said, quote, "Man, 100%. Because, you know, I'm still the biggest fan in the business, and that was when I was 7 years old, changing the channels and stumbled across it, and then got the chance to learn it and have a pretty good run. So I don't want to do nothing else in the ring. I'm done. I've retired. Everybody knows that. I don't need to go out there and drop anybody on a stack of dimes and give them stunners once a year, once every 2 years, whatever. So yes, this connection makes sense. I paved the way that I did. I had the career that I had, but I still watch all of these people that come on the show, so the fact I can still have kind of a hand in the wrestling business and put my finger on the pulse, yes, that's the relationship I want, and it's the relationship that I cherish. And I think at this point, look, can we just stop asking that question? I think people have, in fairness, I think people stopped asking the question about Steve Austin returning to the ring 2-3 years ago at the very least. Everyone knows that he's done. He's been done for a long time. I think the closest he ever got to genuinely considering making a return to the ring was probably 2011. You remember 2011, he had the Steve Austin, was it 2011 or was it 2010? It might have been 2010. Whatever, it might have been even before that. 2010, 2011. Whenever the last Tough Enough show was, when he hosted the Tough Enough show, I think it was 2011. And it was around the WrestleMania 27 time. And he did the Tough Enough show, and he actually got back in the ring briefly, in the sense that he had a bit of a brawl. I think it was Alex Riley and The Miz on Raw after WrestleMania, and he was doing the Tough Enough stuff, and he actually got into the ring, and he took a couple of bumps. There was a rumor at the time he got hurt doing that, and that kind of put him off ever really doing it, and kind of realizing, I can't do it. But I think that was probably the closest, and I'm sure there have been a couple of occasions since he retired in 2003 that he did come close, but for whatever reason it didn't happen. And on the same side of things, you have to realize why he retired, the injuries that made him retired. He had such a bad neck, and it sucks because he retired at the age of, was it 38? He retired in the prime of his career. Really was the prime of his career. He had to retire. He retired at 38, but he retired due to the same sort of stuff as Edge, in the sense that his neck was so bad, if he took a bad bump, he could be paralyzed. Why risk it? Now, I know since then we've seen the likes of Edge return, and now people will say, well, Steve Austin can return. That's maybe the case. Steve Austin's a bit older than Edge, and I'm sure if Steve Austin did want to get his neck looked at, he could. But I remember Steve Austin saying, and even Edge saying, and Kurt Angle saying that they went to the same neck doctor as Steve Austin, and they said Steve Austin had the worst neck than they'd ever seen. Kurt Angle broke his neck like 4 times, and yet Steve Austin's was worse. So that goes to show the situation there when it comes to Steve Austin. And frankly, at this point in his life and his career, I don't want to see Steve Austin back in the ring again. Leave the memories where they were. They were fantastic. Don't ruin them. And he has nothing to prove. The way he went out in WrestleMania 19 against The Rock, the final match in the trilogy, putting The Rock over, it needs no improvement. It needs no improvement. So I don't have a problem with that whatsoever. We have some interesting information when it comes to the Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic as well, because the first round matches of the 2021 WWE NXT Men's Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic will now take place on upcoming episodes of WWE 205 Live. Now, NXT General Manager William Regal actually appeared during last night's 205 Live episode and announced that some of the Dusty Classic first round matches will air on Friday nights. Now, there's no words on yet which matches will air on 205 Live, but the first round will begin next Wednesday and Friday nights. As noted, NXT will feature 2 first-round matches on Wednesday, which will be the Undisputed Era versus Breezango and the Grizzled Young Veterans versus Everrise. The winners of the 2021 Men's Dusty Classic will receive the Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic Cup and a future championship opportunity against the NXT Tag Team Champions Oney Lorcan and Danny Burch. Some people were criticising this. Why are they on 205 Live? Well, it's in the Capitol Wrestling Center. Their first-round matches. I think it's just a case of getting the matches done before the next NXT TakeOver. I'm assuming the next NXT TakeOver on February 14 will feature the finals of the Dusty Tag Team Classic. So it's probably a logistics thing that we need to get the matches done. And also it gives viewers a reason to tune into 205 Live, which I'm sure doesn't do amazing numbers on the network anyway. So that's probably the case when it comes to that. We also have the final 12 teams announced for this year's Dusty Tag Team Classic. Now, previously we mentioned the first 8 or 10 names, but WWE has actually announced the final 2 team names yesterday. So the participating teams list now looks like this. It's Jake Atlas and Isaiah Swerve Scott. The Way, which is Austin Theory and NXT North American Champion Johnny Gargano. Grizzled Young Veterans, Everrise, The Undisputed Era, consisting of Adam Cole and Roderick Strong. Breezango, Legado del Fantasma, Imperium, Drake Maverick and Killian Dane, Kurt Stallion and Austin Gray, Kushida and Leon Ruff, and the Bollywood Boys. I would assume, now we don't have the brackets yet of course, but I would assume that we could probably be looking at a final of maybe, I'm going to say the Grizzled Young Veterans versus the Undisputed Era, maybe. although my pick to win it is the Grizzled Young Veterans. And that's not just because, of course, I'm from the UK like they are, but also because they had such a strong showing last year, and we know that those in WWE, NXT, Triple H, and NXT UK, Shawn Michaels, are big fans of the Grizzled Young Veterans, and I think potentially there could be a big push for them in the future. So they're my picks to win it. Could be wrong. I've been wrong several times before. And finally, we know why the match between AEW star Britt Baker and NWA Women's star Thunder Rosa has been pulled from next week's New Year's Smash Night 2 edition of Dynamite, and that is because of concerns due to the pandemic. AEW had previously announced that Britt Baker would face Thunder Rosa next week, but the match was pulled due to Rosa being exposed to someone who had tested positive for COVID-19. This is according to the Wrestling Observer newsletter. Baker versus Rosa will still take place at a later date when Rosa is allowed to return to action. Next week's Dynamite will feature Britt Baker hosting her waiting room segment instead, with the special guest being former TNT champion Cody Rhodes. The decision was also made to add Tay Conti versus NWA World Women's Champion Serena Deeb to the Wednesday night lineup instead for the NWA Women's World Championship. So that will be an interesting match. It sucks. I was really looking forward to this match. Two of my favourite female competitors in AEW right now, arguably two of, if not the two best, maybe up there with Hikaru Shida as well. Huge fan of Thunder Rosa too. So it sucks. It's a really unfortunate situation, but if it's not safe, don't do it. If it's not safe, so don't do it. If there's any concern, if there's any doubt, you don't do it. You can move it back. And AEW's been very good for doing that. We haven't seen matches cancelled. We've seen them postponed, and they happen eventually. So it's just a case of having to wait a few more weeks, and it'll be a fantastic match. So I'm very excited to see it. But of course, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on the news stories that we have spoken about today? Let me know your thoughts on all the news stories in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about WWE, AEW, Impact Wrestling, all things pro wrestling here on the channel. So be sure to get involved with the community, drop a comment below. All opinions are welcome. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button. Really does help us out here on YouTube, go up the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.